All right.
All right.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Free Lady Show. We're recording this for a second time. You guys don't know that, but we do. But it's kind of fun. And usually when some things happen a second time, it's even better. So welcome, Skylar, to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah?
Kind of again.
Kind of again. You guys had no idea.
We're coming back and recording again.
Yeah. So this is Skylar's podcast room. It's really cool in here, you guys, because he has an amazing setup, a setup that I wish I had. But you know what? It's okay. It's fun to have new experiences and have new rooms to record in because we get to learn. And that's what we're going to talk about today. If you guys are interested in having a podcast, if you have had it in your thoughts for a long time and you're scared to do it, well, Skylar is your guy. And he also has a podcast called Utah Hustlers.
That's right.
What's your podcast about, Skylar?
So it's about how to build your business to $10,000 a month.
Damn.
Yep. So that's everything we talk about. So everything that's talked about in there is to help someone go from that 0 to 10 grand a month. So kind of like startups or just people that are struggling to get to that spot. You know, no one became an entrepreneur so they could make the same amount of money as a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm helping people get past that spot. And so I'm having people on that have done that and much more.
Yeah. So tell us about you. Like, how did you get into the podcasting realm and what were you doing before and what inspired you to be a podcast host?
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny story, but when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. I saw the life that he was able to create as far as time and money went. Mm-hmm. And I wanted that. Mm-hmm. So right out of high school, I started doing window washing, went door to door and just started cleaning people's windows.
Yeah.
And it was going good and did that for a handful of years. And then as I was cleaning these windows, I'd be out there for hours and I'd listen to podcasts. And I'd find myself asking the questions in my head that the host like asked immediately after I thought it. Yeah. So I was like, maybe I should
You're like a psych.
Maybe I should host a podcast. So the idea like spun in my head for a while and eventually I just looked more and more into it and then started looking at gear and then how to start. And I eventually started one with a friend just by chance. He wanted to start one too. So we co-hosted one. Mm-hmm, we went almost 20 episodes and then he moved. So I started my own, realized I was doing a lot of things wrong. I hired a coach. It was almost 10 grand. So it was not cheap, but it was very in depth. And I've learned a lot about it from him, but also from another coach who's a relative and he's helped me with it. Both of them have.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Both of them have $1 million podcasts. So they make over like $1 million a year. And so
Your uncle does too?
It's not my uncle, but yeah. So those two people that helped me, they both have podcasts that bring in $1 million. Yeah. So that's who I'm learning from.
Dang.
Yeah. So anyways, rebranded my whole show because I realized that mine was not specific enough and for the audience.
Right.
So now it's what it is today, Utah Hustlers, how to build your business to 10K a month.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you said like you have to like gear towards the audience. It's really important. If you're starting a podcast, how important is it of how you focus your podcast to an audience that you want to create?
It's super important. And everyone sees Joe Rogan or a lot of these other big entrepreneurs and they're like, oh, I want to have a show like them that talks about anything and brings on people from all walks of life. But their podcast, like, do you know who Alex Hormozi is?
No, I don't.
Okay. So he's a pretty famous like entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will probably know who he is. Some won't, obviously, but he makes hundreds of millions of dollars and his podcast is wildly successful. But before he started talking about business in general, he talked about how to run a gym better for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
It was just, this is how you run a gym.
Right.
And then he expanded after that. So I see it all the time. It's probably the biggest mistake people make when podcasting is they just want to talk about anything and everything. And I think when you're starting, if you don't know what you want to talk about, it's better just to start than to just, not. But I think that's the most important thing is just start, get the reps in, but then figure out what you want your audience to be, who you want that to be. Because if not, then a show for anybody is a show for nobody.
Right.
So people need a reason to listen besides another cool story.
Yeah, exactly. I think about that all the time. As you guys know, I had a podcast out last week, just myself, like asking you guys, like, if this podcast is hitting a nerve with you in a good way, like really connecting to your soul and your heart, where you're really expanding or learning from somebody, or you think of a person as you're listening to an episode and only one person commented, which is my aunt. So thank you, Cindy. I know you're listening to this right now. So I really, really appreciate you. But like, that's the thing. It's like really hard, at least in my perspective, to get engagement. Like that's the hardest thing. And so, for people wanting to have a podcast, like obviously my podcast is really geared towards mental health, like sharing stories about how you got to a place. And not necessarily yours is dealing with mental health, but you still got to a place where you're starting this business and you're starting a movement with Utah Hustlers, which is like super cool. But what is one thing that you can share with the audience of like how you get your customers or your audience to really engage with you when you ask them questions?
I think you gotta help them with a specific problem, because like what I did is I went and talked to people who were like my ideal listener or like, just the audience that I'm trying to communicate with. And I asked them a bunch of questions to find out what's not ideal in your life. What are your pain points? What do you wish was different? So I asked them these questions. That way I knew what's wrong, how I can help them. And so then when I make episodes or make content, I can answer these questions for them, because like the biggest thing I found was people felt like they could not manage their time. Like they were wasting a lot of time. So now I made an episode on time management, and that one did better than like the last 5 I think I uploaded.
Oh, wow.
Because it was specific to what all the entrepreneurs, because I talked to a dozen of them, but it was specific to the problem that they all unanimously, how do you say that word?
Unanimously.
Remember,
what was the word that I was trying to say last time?
We talked about that last time. That some words are just like tongue twister.
Totally.
But they all unanimously said that they felt like they were wasting time. They didn't have enough time to accomplish their goals. And so now it's like, okay, I know what kind of content to make because I know what their pain points are. So if it relates to people and their issues, I think they're going to respond or at least watch the entire video.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to ask my audience more questions like that. Like, what do you want to hear? Like, exactly what kind of person would you like me to interview? But that's why I thought it was so cool to interview you, because I know a lot of people who want to start a podcast. People text me all the time, like, how do you start a podcast? Well, if you see my first episode, like my face is like right here. I'm in a basement at my uncle and aunt's house telling my story in front of workout equipment. And, like my background sort of changed through time. And now like it's still decent background. I have microphones now, like I didn't before. I still have a ring light, which I need to switch out, like things like that. But I'm just saying that because you can start anywhere. You can start with anything, like, with having a quiet space. Your audio is okay. Having a microphone is way better. Like, it's very interesting when other podcasters talk about the tone of what they hear in their ear. And for a long time, I was like, well, my message, it's all about the message. But when you have a microphone, those little details do help. So talk about like what kind of equipment is essential for podcasting if someone is first starting out.
Yeah, so I think if someone's first starting out, like the bare minimum, you need a smartphone. So anyone listening to this already like meets that criteria, right? So you can download Spotify for podcasters. It's an app, and it's also on the internet. Like you can get it on your laptop. You can download that, and you can basically upload a podcast. You can record it all from your phone. So like if you have AirPods or something, you can put those in, set up your camera for the video, and you could record your first podcast. Just write out your content and record it. And you can upload it all from your phone. So you don't need any equipment to start. And I think that's really cool because a lot of people will let the equipment stop and they're like, oh, it doesn't look professional. They're like perfectionists, right?
Oh, yes.
Which is how I was. I bought all the equipment before I started.
Right. And that's not a bad thing either, though.
No, it's not. Yeah. But sometimes it can stop us from progressing, right? Because if I would have started earlier, then I would be that much better now. Right. Because the podcast is so much about what you say and like how you're able to communicate like the value that you're giving your audience. Yes. So I think it's very important to get good gear, but it's more important to start. Yeah. But once you do, the most important thing is get a good microphone. Right. You can get really good microphones for like $40. Yes. On Amazon.
Yes, you can.
So get a good microphone, because having good audio, it's kind of like putting on a suit and tie before you go into a job interview. Right. It says a lot about the person that's behind the mic.
It's so true. I mean, before Daniel, when he started his podcast, because he overthinks so much, and I think we hit this a little bit last time, and he was overthinking everything, and I'm like, just get the freaking story out. It's amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he's amazing, and he has such a gift and such a niche of audiences for his podcast because he's dealt with PTSD and now he knows how to help other people, and he's amazing. And it took him, I think he launched his podcast maybe 6 months after I was digging into him, just doing it. But
Yeah.
he just started, and, he still just has his computer and has really good lighting. I don't think he has microphones yet, but the audio still sounds pretty good. But yeah, you can get cheap microphones for like $40. And if you're interviewing people, online, you can send them like cheap little microphones too. So they sound good, not just you. I think that was something that I learned in September is one of my friends was like, dude, you just buy a bunch of little mics and just send it to the person you're interviewing. So that way you guys both sound pretty good. And I felt like that was a really good tip that I learned. So what is your podcast about? Like, why did you start it? Like, what is behind the scenes of this podcast? What do you really want people to learn?
I want people to learn how to obviously be successful in business. But something I learned is I need to have goals for myself for the podcast. Like, what would I want out of it? And I'd love to be able to live off the money and just do that.
Right.
But then I also need goals for my audience. Because if I don't have goals for my audience, it's a completely selfish podcast. But it's okay to have, those goals for you. But I had to set those goals for my audience. And that goal is in 6 months, if people are listening every single week to every episode and applying what they hear, which a lot of times are not these big things that you need to apply. It's just like, here's how to network a little bit every day. And it takes 10, 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So if someone's listening for 6 months, my goal for them is that they will now be making 10 grand a month because of the information they have. But the internet's full of information. Like, information is not the problem. It's the implementation.
Damn, that is so good. That is so, so good because you can get so lost when you're trying to look at things online. You're like, and then you're like, well, is this person like real or are they fake? Like, is this really good information or is it not good information? And so I think a lot of people struggle with that because then they get overloaded and then they get overwhelmed. So right here, you guys, watch every single episode and hopefully you'll be making $10,000. And if you're not, guess what? Guess you get to talk to Skylar about it and be like, hey, this is what's happened. Or maybe you've made more money. So it's something is working. So I think that's really cool that you're giving this information to help people because that's what people need right now. I feel like there's so much destruction, especially what's going on right now. People are scared out of their minds. And we don't need to be scared. We need to be prepared. So, getting our house in order, getting your podcast in order, getting all those things in order so you can just keep doing what you're doing and not be in that train of the same people, like all being scared. You know what I mean? All moving in the same direction of, oh shit, what's going to happen? Just stay consistent with what you're doing and be prepared for everything. And that includes everything that you're doing. So if you're listening to the right people, like your podcast, to help people win at life, it's a win-win situation because you're helping somebody win. And then that's the best feeling in the world. It's the best feeling in the world, right? Like, I mean, and that's all I want. Like, if I'm helping one person with my podcast, if somebody's story is relating to you and you can change your life because of that, my job is done.
Exactly. And so this podcast is about mental health, right?
Right.
Does it help people's mental health to talk about their life, their problems, what they're thinking about?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Even though this episode's about podcasting and how to do that, people starting a podcast are going to get more healthy because they're actually talking through what they're doing and what they're thinking. And then they can also, have people on, interview them and go over their information with someone else.
Yes.
It's almost like your weekly therapy session.
It really is. And that is a really, really excellent point that you brought up because it all does flow into that realm, that space. Because when you encourage somebody to talk about it, because people ask can I be in your podcast? Yes, it's for everybody. Like, I'm not going to judge you unless you come to me, I want to be on your podcast, and then you tell me, I'm really scared. Okay, cool. Well, let's get you unscared and let's do it. And then you just totally ghost me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm not going to reach out to you. But if you want to grow, sharing your story is about growing. Like when I shared my story, yes, it was an older story that I told. I do have family members that still think I'm still thinking in that space,
Mhm.
and it's okay. You know, someday they'll see that this is something bigger than my story. But when I told my story, it was all released out there. And I had so many people who were like, Brittney, I've literally been through the same thing. I'm going through the same thing. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being vulnerable, because I didn't know how to be vulnerable. So it's really even about just being vulnerable with yourself, like saying, you know, things out loud. In my coaching group, the Freedom Den, we went over this last month about telling the truth or lying. And so it all started out with telling the truth in the mirror for a week. Then it was telling the truth to your partner, your inner circle for a week. And then it was telling the truth to your family, you know, like kind of like you're starting here and you keep coming here, because it does take 30 days to implement a new habit. And then at the end of the last week was telling your truth online. It sets you free, right?
Mhm.
Like people say that all the time. I know it's like cliche, the truth will set you free. But everyone knows I'm like so silly.
But everyone says that because it is true.
It's so true. Because if you're not speaking your truth, you're trying to be somebody else.
That's deep.
And how long can you be somebody else for? You can be somebody else for a while, and you'll get there. You might be successful. You might have like the fancy car or whatever. I know I'm being like materialistic right now, but that's just an example. It's only going to get you so far. If you're going to get all the way to making 10 grand a month, like you're teaching your students to get like a nice car and all those things, if you're not speaking your truth, it's going to crash and burn right in front of your eyes. So it's important that, you know, when people do utilize my podcast, they get to be vulnerable. They get to be comfortable and tell their story. And I really feel like people like yourself, or like people feel very comfortable around me, like doing hair. People tell me everything. And so that's why I was like, well, maybe I should start a podcast and just go beyond that comfortableness that I am in, because obviously like we are all learning from each other. So why not make it bigger? And like, you're very comfortable to talk to, very comfortable to learn from, and your space is really comfortable too. And I feel like when you create those spaces for people, people want to be on your podcast even more. They get to experience what it's like to be free of what they're holding in. And that's the most beautiful thing about a podcast, because I was just talking about this last week. I was talking to my mom, which you guys know I don't talk to her very much. And we were actually having a really good conversation, but, you know, it kind of reverted back to the same thing. And that's okay. I'm still always going to give her space and grace for us to have a relationship. I'm doing the best that I can. And with that said, I told her, I said, you know, that story doesn't own me anymore. It was my story to tell. I've never told it online. So it was like this story of mine senses that it is happening in my life right now. But as you have watched my podcast, you will see that it doesn't define me. And that's what it's really about when you're speaking on your podcast, or when you're leading a coaching group, or when you have your people for Utah Hustlers. You're getting to expand people's minds, and you heal too. You heal even more. You become better. You become brighter, and you become the person that you want to be, because you're living your life freely through speaking your truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think people respect when people are like really successful and they've got life figured out, but I think they respect even more when you don't, and that you're vulnerable about it.
Dude.
You know, because like it's hard to relate to Superman, because although he's like super cool, I'm not invincible. I can't fly. I can't, you know, but that like, I think that's like on social media, so many people try to pretend like they're Superman.
Yes.
They try to pretend like nothing affects them, that they're perfect. But that's not as relatable as saying, hey, I am successful, but I also, that's me.
I think this is just what happens.
Yeah,
it happened
I
last time
so.
too. Like, I guess our energy is very setting at a high frequency that people are trying to get in touch with.
Phones went off if you guys couldn't hear that, but
did last time.
It did last time. But yeah, basically it's a lot easier to relate to someone that is successful, but also says, hey, this month I was struggling with this. This month my business didn't do as well.
Right.
And I'm trying to find new ways to get clients, to network, to find new hosts or guests on the podcast. Like it's a lot more, it's a lot easier to relate to people. And I think that's what's actually going to make people go viral. That's what our mutual friend Alex Urban said.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, you blow up posting and like standing in front of Lamborghinis and on private jets. It's the realness that people are actually searching for and continue to watch on social media.
Well, and that's the whole jam of my podcast. It's like, these are real people. These are real stories that are going on. It doesn't mean these stories define the person, because these people that I have on have gone through it and they're here to share their story. So you can pick up little things from this person and relate it to your life. Because if you have a hard time figuring out how to get through a problem, you can listen to not just my podcast. There's so many podcasts that are very similar to mine. Yours is similar to mine. It's just business related. We're all trying to help everybody that we can. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about podcasting and the circle of podcasters that I know. We are continually trying to help as many people as possible. And that's the beautiful thing. I don't have to do this podcast. You don't have to do the podcast. But it is nice to know when we are serving people and helping people and knowing that we do that. And that's kind of why, you know, I've had this podcast for over a year and a half. I don't even know. And I think this will be like, 67, 68 episodes in.
That's awesome. Most will only make it to like 5 or 7.
Yeah, totally.
So you are way above average as far as that goes.
Totally. I mean, it's about consistency. And I haven't been that consistent for the first time. And you know what? It's okay. Like, I feel like when I have people on my podcast, sometimes, and this is real life about podcasting, I will have like 2 months of recorded episodes. And I'm like, gotta think about it. It's just done. And right now, I'm at a phase where I'm like recording for the following week or whatever. And that's okay too. But I think why people fail in their podcast, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when they feel like they don't know what their audience knows about them and what they're learning and everything like that. Or they're struggling to find someone to come on their podcast. So talk about like those moments when you're at your low points in your podcasting, trying to find what's going to work for your podcast. Like, what do you do? How do you get that hype back up and that consistency back up?
With the consistency, I think it's important to stay in front of schedule. Like you probably felt great when you were 2 months out.
Oh, yeah.
Like you didn't know how to think about it.
Yeah.
And so like the more stressful a podcast is going to be, the less likely you're going to continue to do it.
Right.
So you might as well stack all the chips in your favor as possible.
Right.
And anytime I'm working with someone who's starting like a new podcast, I say record 4 episodes, 1 month's worth before you release.
Right.
And then just every week get a new one. Because then you don't have to think about it. That if you go on vacation or something happens, you're good. And you can do a little extra work in, the following weeks to record 2 episodes in a week.
Exactly.
So staying ahead of schedule is very key to like being stress-free as far as podcast goes. That was me too. It's like I recorded a bunch before I released. And then I went through all those and, a couple episodes, I had a couple people on and the interviews they just weren't what I think the audience was looking for. I didn't feel comfortable releasing them. So I was like out for like a week and a half. I think I had 3 guests in and it was just like, this isn't going to work, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I had like everything in line. So that way I was able to not release those, but still be consistent. So
yeah. Good for you for saying no.
Yeah. And it sucks because they came in and I've learned a lot from that.
Right.
Like to still give them the audio files. That way they can create content from it if they want. It's good to tell people before they come on your podcast, be like,
Right.
hey, just so you know, I don't release every episode that's recorded. Most of them I do, but if I don't, it's for various reasons. Maybe the audio didn't work. Maybe the conversation didn't go exactly how it's supposed
Right.
to, how, you know, how the audience would want.
Right.
So it's good to let people know ahead of time that it might not be uploaded, but you can still give them the content so they can upload it. So it's still like worth it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's still a win because they can make it into clips. That's where I struggle the most because I'm like, oh my God, I got to do all this stuff. And that's what I have a clip once a week for the new podcast, but it does make a difference. I've seen it. I've seen you do it. I've seen other, podcasters, they're releasing clips like every single day. And to me, that is like overload for me because I am already like, trying to post like my hair stuff every day and like just words of wisdom that will catch people's eyes and feel what I'm trying to say or come across. And then, now I'm making like earrings and having that more creative. So I'm in more of the creative realm. So when it comes to tech stuff, I'm like, but it's not that hard. It's not that hard. You just have to take that time or you hire somebody like Skylar. Or he might know somebody that can do these clips for you. That's also other possibilities, right?
Yeah. No, I do. I know people that do that. I do that for people. So if you just want to record, like sit down, record and be done. Yeah. Like reach out to me. I'll take everything off it. Now I won't say it's cheap,
right?
And I guess cheap is different for every different person. Right. But, even just making clips for someone, that's actually not too expensive.
Right.
So that's just one less thing off your plate. Right. And that makes a big difference because people are like, oh, I didn't even know you had a podcast until you post something on social media, right? Because that's where like your audience is right now. For everyone that doesn't have a podcast, they're on social media. Right. And so if you don't post clips or talk about the podcast or whatnot, they're not going to know.
I know, it's so hard.
But it's also, this is a gold nugget for anyone podcasting. You'll want to take this, but have you ever posted like a link to go to your podcast? So you probably posted one to like Apple or Spotify.
Yeah, all of them.
So what about the people that don't use Apple?
Well, I have it on YouTube, Audible, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, and Spreaker. So there's 7 ways you can listen to my podcast. And for a long time, I was like, I'm not doing it on those other podcasts. It's on YouTube. Like, hello, everybody has YouTube. Yeah. But at the same time, I recognize that if you're on more platforms, like if you have an iPhone and you have Apple CarPlay in your phone, your podcast app will come on your screen. How easy is that? Yeah. So that's why I did it, because people utilize these things in the newer smart cars now too. Yeah. So like if you post a clip or post like a link, like, hey, go listen to my podcast here, and it's to Apple Podcast, for everyone that's either on like YouTube or on Spotify, they're going to click that. And that's not where they're going to like listen to your podcast, right? So if you go to podfollow.com, you can find your podcast on there. You sign in, you claim it as yours, and you can modify where the links go. But every time I post a podcast link for my podcast on social media, if someone clicks that and if they use Spotify, it takes them to Spotify. If they use Apple, it takes them to Apple. So it immediately takes them to their podcast player. So they just have to hit play. There's less resistance. What? That is mind blowing right now. And it's a free tool, but like almost no one knows about it. And I don't use anything else to share it. Because if they click it on their computer, it'll take them to YouTube. Right. So it just takes them exactly where they need to go to listen to it. Because 99% of people are going to listen on Apple or Spotify. Right. And if they want to watch it, they're going to go to YouTube. Right. Right. So it takes them to one of those 3 places, depending on what device they're on. And actually just that. So that's a huge thing. You have to do one link, and it takes them to where they listen to it. So they just have to hit play. You take away all the friction. Oh, that's wonderful. So, I'm going to write that down up here. I mean, I'm going to ask you afterward. Like, I'll text you the link. I need that link. That's awesome. Yeah. That really takes the thinking out of, because like when I have it on other platforms, I make sure I share it in my story. Here's this link for this and this link for that. And it gets kind of annoying, to be honest. But I do it. Yeah. I won't like not do it. But that's a really beautiful way for getting more listeners to listen. Yeah, because if someone clicks it and they go to Apple,
but they use Spotify, they're gonna be like, oh, now I have to go look it up. I have to open up my podcast player, and it's just there's a lot more friction.
Right.
And if they're in the car driving and they just need one click or something,
yeah,
they're just probably not gonna listen to it. So
yeah,
the easier it is to do something, the more likely someone is to do it.
yeah,
You're just making it easier for your audience.
Sure. Especially now, like we are like so like want it now. You know what I mean? And so if someone has to like download something to listen to, you know, your podcast or listen to like a music file or something like that, it's annoying.
Yeah.
Because people just want it to be easy, and it should be. We should have easy access. So that's really, really great advice. So how long has your Utah Hustler podcast been?
It's been out. We just released episode 8. So it's been out 1 month. There's 2 episodes a week. So one is an interview with me and a Utah entrepreneur that has done 10 grand and over. Mm-hmm. Some people do millions of dollars. Some people are, doing 20, 30K.
Yeah.
Either way, they're making, and that's their take home. That's not just what the business is making,
right.
but they're taking home that amount of money.
Right.
So that's the first week, and we always focus on one specific thing. So this last person I had on, his name was Jared Briggs. We talked about networking. Before that, we talked about how to hire people and when you can hire people, for new business that is still growing. We talked about how to build your personal brand with Alex Urban.
Oh yeah, man, that guy's a genius.
He's awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and he was super cool when he came on, wasn't in a hurry to leave, showed me his car, all these things. So cool guy. check out Alex. But that's like the first half of the week, the podcast. And then we go over like personal development. Because I think we can only build a business as a life like as good as we are and as healthy as we are. Yeah. Like a business can only be as healthy as the owner and operator.
Gosh, for sure.
Yeah. So the second one is all personal growth and development, how to manage your time better, how to set up a vision board, how to, how to like increase your confidence, things like that. Because if you don't have all that in place, then you're probably not going to build a very profitable business.
Right.
So
how important is your personal brand?
I'd say from talking to Alex on here, because the coolest thing about a podcast too is you kind of get you get like a free coaching session every week. Yeah. From someone who's done more than you.
Right.
So that's the coolest thing. But yeah, talking to him and in my personal experience, I think it's everything. Because like when I first started window washing and I started going around to the neighborhood that I grew up in, they didn't buy from me because they necessarily were looking for a window cleaner. Yeah. They bought because it was Skylar. And people will do that for if you create raving fans, right, and they love what you stand for and what you do, they'll buy anything from you because they know what they're getting because they're getting you.
Yeah, it's true. And I know that for doing hair for 20 years, it's like there were times in my career, I'm like, well, they're not going to want to see me because maybe this person's better. But guess what that is? That's not me being confident in who I am. And so when I was starting out as a hairdresser, I was not confident at all. That was during like 10 years of that was still when I was really depressed. Mm-hmm. So that's half of my career where I was struggling of like being confident with what I was doing, setting prices. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? Like people talking me out of like, or talking me into giving them a discount, like all these things. And like, I understand, but when that happens, you're discounting yourself. When you're discounting yourself, you're discounting the confidence that you provide as a service to that client. And so now, people have said, well, we just love you, Brittney. Like, and yes, I am really good at doing hair. I'm not going to lie about that because I love it. You know what I mean? But I also want to give them this experience. I had a client today. She's like, man, like I followed you because you're the only person that I can really talk to about spirituality and like connection and deep thought and dreams and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, baby, like you can talk to me about anything. I'm all for it. And so it was really interesting that somebody didn't give her that space to talk freely about what she believed in. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is a part of my brand of being comfortable or a part of you for who you are of like having people wanting to wash their windows or being on your podcast. And yeah, I mean, Alex is a genius when it comes to that. And I will talk really briefly about Alex because he just launched the Arena community. He has the Arena coaching group and he has scaled people's businesses like crazy. Like that guy is a genius and has a heart of gold. He's a sweet man. And so he created the Arena community that's $10 a month just to create the community. So you can, like Skylar and I are on there. We could get to talk to other people. We can invite them to our podcast. We can share what we're doing. And it just creates a network of people. And that's another thing. If you are struggling to find your community, listen to Skylar's podcast, listen to my podcast, listen to other people's podcasts. But if you need more help, get into these communities, man. Like, it doesn't matter what community it is, but if you're in a part of a community, it lights your fire because you grow and you can understand who you are. You can understand what personal brand that you are. Like, you are your personal brand. And what you said about health is wealth, man. It's like, that is like so huge. And if you're not healthy, if you're not living by what you're saying, guess where that's going to go? That's going to go to fraud town, immediately. Okay. So, this is what I talk about. You probably have this too. Like, you probably have a morning routine that's going to set you up for success. So I talk about mine all the time. What is yours to make sure that you are providing the best health as well for you and creating the best podcast?
So yeah, the routine's everything. Cause like our daily routine, like I think 80% of what we do is done on autopilot. Mm-hmm. Like, even if you don't think you have a morning routine, you have one. You're just not intentional about it, but most people could probably think about it, and they do about the same things every day. Mm-hmm. But my morning routine starts with, I wake up and, it doesn't always happen this way, but wake up and I hit snooze, which a lot of people are gonna be like, what? Hit snooze? Everyone says don't hit snooze. I hit snooze and I visualize for 9 minutes. And I usually don't fall asleep, but I visualize like, okay, what is my day gonna look like? What do I want to accomplish? What are my dreams? Where am I heading towards? So I'll visualize. And then I'm a spiritual guy. I believe in God. So I pray really quick, and then I listen after. Immediately after that, I go and hydrate because I just slept 8 hours. Mm-hmm. And if you go weigh yourself, like before you go to bed and when you wake up, like it's kind of weird, but it's like 3-4 pounds different.
Yeah, it is. So, it is.
Yeah. So I go and hydrate, and then I immediately, ideally, like I work out like first thing in the morning. Because I think, at least at first for me, it's not so much anymore, but it was like kind of hard to get that into my routine. It's something I did every day. Mm-hmm. And so in the morning, at least for me, I had the most willpower in the morning. Oh, and so I was like, I'm going to do the hardest things, the things that I know I'm likely to talk myself out of or push, out of the way.
That's a great tip.
I do those in the morning. Mm-hmm. So work it out in the morning. Then if I have any other dirty tasks, like cleaning the car or anything like that, I'll go do those, but then I'll go shower, and then it's go time. It's work. It's, get down and do the least fun things to do in business first. Cause we're still most likely going to not do it if as the day goes on. So there's something called decision fatigue. You heard of that?
No, not in that sense, but I already know what you mean.
Yeah. So it's just like the more decisions we make, it gets harder and harder to make decisions because it takes brain power.
Yeah.
So many people
it's like a battery, your brain.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many people after work or after a podcast, like this happens to me after podcasts, because it's like, well, we just had a deep conversation. Like, it's kind of draining sometimes, especially like at first. But just as we go through the day, we just get, more like mentally fatigued.
Right.
But that includes our decisions.
Right.
And so anyway, so that's why it's important to do like the toughest things or the things you like have to do in the morning. So I set up my day strategically like that. So that way I'm doing the most important things first.
I love that. I love that. And I love that this snooze thing is like, this is like blowing my mind right now. Cause I have snooze button too, but I have it earlier. So I wake up actually at the time that I want.
I like that.
But now because, I'm going to be 41 next weekend. And I think I talked about this a little bit last time, but you guys don't understand that, like about how, this last like 2 years have been like hiring holistic nutritionist, Taryn Perry. Thank you. Hiring, a gym trainer, which is Azaria. Thanks to her, she's freaking amazing. I might not have like the bodies of those women, right? Because that's what they do. But I have the mindset of making sure that these things are in order, right? Mm-hmm. So going back to like my first alarm is actually to take some medication because I'm not on birth control. I'm not, having all these hormones, but I need to replace it with, I have it. Hormone doctors, Idaho Health and Hormones. which are amazing people because they do everything as holistically as possible. So I have that alarm. And then because part of my morning routine is juicing, I can't have anything for 30 minutes. So then my second alarm goes off and then I get up. But sometimes it's still so hard because I hate waking up in the dark. And I want to shout out to Mel Robbins. Now, if you follow her on Instagram, she is amazing. She has an amazing podcast. She is just a beautiful soul. And she has this video out right now, and she's posted it before. And this is the second time she's posted it. If you have a hard time getting out of bed like me, and this is talking about morning routine, like you're warm, you're snuggly, it's still dark out. What she says is to literally crawl out of bed, and then you lay down in fetal position for a second, and then you start moving around. And you literally crawl to the bathroom until you actually stand up, and then you're up. You know what I mean? So those are the things you have to find what works for you, right? That might work for you. 2 alarms might work for you. Praying and then listening for 9 minutes might work for you. Just find out what works for you, but make it consistent. Because, the first thing I do is I pound as much water. I think I drink this entire bottle right when I wake up.
Really? Oh my goodness. That's like 32 ounces.
Yeah, I try.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not this bottle, but it's another one because you want to just flush everything out of your system. I really am involved in cleaning out your liver and all those things. So then, I juice my celery. And that's a whole nother story about that. But it's very cleansing and all those things. And then I make my tea, and then I actually will take sage every single morning and I pray while I'm cleansing my house every single day. Because I went to church last Sunday at Awaken Church. I don't know if you've been there. It's actually a really cool church.
Where is it?
I think it's in in Jordan somewhere.
Okay.
It only takes 8 minutes from my house, so maybe it's I'm still learning.
Yeah, I'd love to come. Send me an address.
Yeah, I might go on Sunday. So it's really cool. It's a non-denominational church. And they just talk about loving God and loving other people. And Pastor Matt is amazing. And the experience I had growing up with churches and then trying to find one has been awful. But, I still have had my faith and put my knee down to God a year and a half ago again, really, really surrendering, because I had a hard time saying God for a long time because of that word from a family member. It just kind of got distorted. Right. And so really love that church. And they were talking about, speaking of saging and cleansing your house, about your energy. So this is part of your morning routine, setting up your energy for that day. Because once one bad spirit is in, this is what another Pastor Matt from Idaho's Awaken was down here this weekend. And he's just man, once you have one bad spirit come in, they leave for a little while. You think they're gone. And then they bring in 7 more bad energies. So it's really important for me to sage my house every single day because I live around so many people. And I literally say the devil is not welcome here. Bad energy is not welcome here every single day. And I pray, and then I drink my tea, and then I meditate, and then I read, and then I will go and add value or answer people back. Daniel will text me, and I, of course, text him back because that's my man. That's my partner. He's important to me. So whatever that means to you, you're going to set up your day with success. Now, your day might go down the hole, super sour, but at least you started it right. You know what I mean? And I love that you talk about, for me too, I have to work out in the morning. I'm not going to work out. I don't know how people do that. Oh my God.
After the workday's done.
Oh
and
man.
You've done all these different things.
I won't be able to go to sleep either.
Yeah. But that works for them.
It does.
But for me, it's I don't want to do that.
Yeah. But I also have worked so hard to create my own schedule. So that's why I do work out in the morning, but I'm not a 4 a.m. workout person.
that's another level.
That is a whole nother level. And I very much look up to those people, but I am just not like that. And that's okay.
That's the thing is everyone has to do what works for them, because no two people are the same. Some people are going to say, if you want to be successful, make a lot of money, you have to make your bed first thing in the morning. You have to drink a gallon of water a day. You have to work out for an hour. And None of those have anything to do with making money, actually.
Mm-mm.
Are they could they help you get in a routine and like elevate your energy? Sure. But like some people don't do that stuff. Some people wake up at 6 a.m. Some people wake up at 9
Right.
and they're still successful. So
Right.
what does it really come down to? I think it's just the actions that you take.
Right. But I also do think taking care of your space, which is also your body, right? You're taking care of those things is going to help you be more successful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're not like training your mind, which is, working out and then training your mind.
Strong mind, strong body, strong body, strong
and having
mind.
a purpose, right? Because your mind and your body work together.
Yep.
But if you don't have a purpose, why are you doing it? So always try to find your purpose, and you'll find that purpose within your mind and body. So I do think those things all, come together when you want to be successful. And it does change your life. You are going to be happier.
Oh, yeah. Like, have you ever walked into like a messy space or like a hoarder's place? It's hard to think.
It is hard to think.
It's stressful. Like the energy is just like, like you're being like it's like your brain or energy just being like taken from you.
Right.
And so environment has a lot to do with our energy. So I'm definitely not saying like, don't make your bed, like make your bed.
Oh, heck yeah. I make my bed every day.
But it's like more just like,
add that.
Yeah. Do what works for you and your schedule. And, like I'm not waking up at 4 to work out. I'm also not working out 4 p.m. I do what works for me.
Yeah. You got to find out what works for you. But yeah, my best friend, Emily, she just retired from the Army 2 years ago. And she's like, girl, I got every day. She told me that years ago. And then I'm like, why? I'm just going to go back in it. She's like, but if you make your bed, you're setting yourself up for just having something nice to come home to instead of coming home to a mess. It really makes a difference to that brain power, to that mental capacity that you're talking about. So everything is good to go. And that's why morning routines are great. But I think evening routines are really great too.
That's something I need to work on.
Yeah. I just talked about this. I had this epiphany in August when I was wanting to talk about a topic for my coaching group. And I was like, man, when we go to bed, our minds are still working out all the things that we went through. And they're also going through what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, yes, I believe in God, but I also believe in the subconscious mind of that energy. And so I changed my nightly routine, and it's not that much different. It's these little tiny tweaks. And so, like in the morning and at night, I talk about what I have gratitude for and what I'm thankful for. Because honestly, you guys, I think I'm crazy sometimes about starting my own business in hair after only being here for almost 6 months now and building my clientele all over again.
Wow.
It's wild. And so there are very much times when I wake up in anxiety, like I don't have enough clients. I don't have, you know what I mean? So if I talk about what I'm grateful for, a roof over my head, a water bottle, a pillow to sleep on, a toothbrush, then your body will get into that energy and understand that like, oh, okay, I have things that I'm grateful for. So going to bed like that is something else because your subconscious mind is starting to work in that realm. And then also chanting like what you want to happen. Like when I'm going to sleep, I'm thinking about like what I want to happen the next day, what I want to happen the next day. And I just repeat it and I fall asleep that way. And so now my subconscious mind is working for me.
While you're sleeping.
While you're sleeping. I was like, I never thought, I don't even know how I thought about that. It just came to me one day. And as simple as it is, and I'm sure people around the world already do that, but it's something else that's so easy. You know what I mean? And it's just like, when you have these morning routines, these nightly routines, and you're putting yourself out there to teach people and help people how to win, if you're not going by those things, then how can you teach people and express all of this energy, this information without those things? It's really cool how all of that works. You know what I mean? And when you hit that level of the highest frequency, what Alex just talked about last week, that call was unbelievable. But we want to vibrate at that level, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can't be happy every single day and every single moment of our lives. So that's why we have to start out with these things, because, there is anger, there is sadness, there is depression, there's all those things. And it's okay to feel all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also not okay to, cover them up with something else. It's to embrace them and share them and be real with your audience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because I think if we're feeling sad, we're feeling depressed, we're feeling these emotions, they're in us, right? And the only way to get it out is either talking about it or one, for me, like if I'm angry, if I just have rage in me, if I hit a pillow or hit a chair, that I don't have to talk about it anymore. I just have to hit something. But it's so weird. And I talked to my therapist about this too, but
yeah.
She talked about the psychology behind it, which I don't remember, but
right.
there's something that has to do with the impact and the energy leaving your body. I think some people do that with sadness too, and other emotions, but it's the movement of either speaking, because words have energy. Yes, I have 2 jars of rice. Have you ever seen this? You take 2 jars of rice made from the same pan, 2 identical jars. You write love on one jar and you write hate on the other jar, and you wait. And I have them here. I'll show you after.
Oh my God. I have to see this.
Now, the difference, I've seen some people who do it, and after a few months, they're completely different. Mine aren't as different as what I've seen, and maybe it's the type of rice I use, but one is clearly more white than the other. And it's the one with love on it.
Wow.
And they're identical, other than the word I put on it.
Wow.
So words have energy, even unspoken, just with writing.
Oh yeah.
So that has energy, but also the impact, so that's way to get emotion out. So anyway.
No, I mean, that is so, I talk about this all the time. I learned this from Amanda Francis. She wrote the book, oh my God, it has the F word in it, but she's very powerful, female that has made a ton of money. And her book is amazing. I don't know why I'm forgetting about this, but the author is Amanda Francis.
Is it un-F your brain or something like that? No, different.
Not that one. It has something to do with rich, money, and the F word. And I just can't think of it right now, but it's a great book. And she talks about that God will always have your back and that energy is always around you. And a lot of people, the energy is what they forget. People know about religion and God. And honestly, if you let God lead, your life's going to be way better. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care if you believe in aliens, but if alien is your jam, believe in that so hard and lean on it. You know what I mean? And then let that energy flow, because people forget that everything that we do is from energy. Everything. We have to move because of energy. We have to plant food with energy. You know what I mean? And that energy makes a difference if you're loving on it or if you're hating on it. And so that's why meditation is a wonderful tool to get that set up and creating that positive energy around you, even through the darkest times, the hardest times. That's when you want to do it the most. And that's what people don't understand is those are the times that you have to work through the hardest, because those lessons are unforgettable. They're priceless. But a lot of people don't want to put in that hard work. And that's why it's so hard for people to be vulnerable and people to understand that they have something in them that is so beautiful. You know what I mean? I talk about this all the time. There's no other Skylar out there in this whole world. Isn't that cool? If you really think about it and utilize who you are as that person, no matter what you've been through, it's who you are. And it's beautiful. You know what I mean? And be able to talk about these Utah hustlers on your podcast, because everyone started from somewhere. And that's the beautiful thing, right? A lot of people are like, oh, you probably were born into that, blah, blah, blah. No, it's called hard work. I hate that too.
I hate when people say it, because it's like discounting or discrediting every blood, sweat, all the blood, sweat, and tear that I put into building what I've done and all that. It's no, I wasn't given this. Wasn't just taught how to do this by growing up by my parents. It's no, I had to invest a lot of time and money and fail a lot to succeed.
Yes, you have to fail so many times.
I totally agree. Who you are, it's you have a monopoly on the marketplace, and that's you, because people will buy you and what you stand for, and everything I said earlier. But think of it in like, it's such a cool way to think about it, but it's like you have a monopoly. No one else can touch that. And that's who you are.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Isn't it cool? And yeah, when you're depressed and when you're sad, you don't see those things, but you still have to work towards that. And there are some people that are born into money, but they still have to work hard to carry that out. And I think sometimes they have to work even harder because they have to like build their brand themselves instead of being like, I don't know why this is in my head, but like Kevin Hart has 1 million kids. You know what I mean? Kevin Hart is very, very successful. And so like, for example, being Kevin Hart's children, they're probably called, oh, you're Kevin Hart's kid, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, sometimes that might be even harder to create your own identity and your own person and your own brand.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm thankful how I grew up. I'm thankful, even though it was rough, but there are so many beautiful things that I've learned and so many beautiful experiences and beautiful memories I have of my family, like growing up and like thinking that we're Ninja Turtles and catching, burning Barbie's hairs on fire or like painting it with markers. Like those things like mold you to who you are today.
Mm-hmm.
And it molds you into a person that either wants to help others or you're just in it for yourself. And there's a huge difference right there. I feel like what's beautiful about podcasting and having your people on there, they get to share what they know. I don't really truly think that if you know something that you should keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The other beautiful part about that is when you're teaching others, you actually teach yourself all over again.
Yeah, exactly. Like anytime I've taught someone something, I learn way more teaching than being taught. And so that's a great thing. Like if you're learning how to do something,
right,
start a podcast on it and interview people who know how to do it. Like you'll learn 10 times faster.
Right.
That way.
And you just learn from the people that you're interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, this is cool.
A free coaching session, because it's
really
an exchange
is.
of value. You give them a platform to be on. You give them content through your podcast and you get to ask them any question you want.
Yeah. So who is your podcast coach? Do you mind sharing that with the audience? Maybe some of these people could hire them too.
Yeah. So their name is Kevin Schmidlin. So he has a program. It's called the Grow the Show Accelerator, I believe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they can find that. Or if they actually contact me, I can send them a link that gets them straight there. I can't remember if there's a discount attached to that or not, but we'll see either way.
Right.
But yeah, they can learn from there. There's a huge course. They do a lot of the work for you. I know the price has gone up since I joined. So don't expect the price I said earlier, but I think you also get more with that too.
Yeah.
Though. So look at what you get, not what you give.
Now, okay. So this is the other thing when people invest in themselves, they get really scared of the number.
Mm-hmm.
Why should you not be scared of the number when you are investing in yourself? I
kind of think you should be scared.
Yeah.
Like not to, you should be scared, but not to a point where it stops you from,
Yeah.
Because like if you feel fear, that's when you're going to move the most. Like if like if you're investing all your money into a coach, you have to win.
Yeah.
There's no other option.
Right.
And so guess what's going to happen?
Right.
You're going to do everything you have to do to win because you got to pay rent next month. You got to cover your bills.
I guess that's true. I understand that outlook.
So it's kind of a different way to look at it, but it's still important to move. Like if it doesn't scare you, it's probably not stretching you enough. So be willing to just be willing to move forward, even though there's fear there, and then use that fear to your advantage.
Yeah.
Like be like, okay, I'm really scared. I'm going to be wildly successful.
Totally. I mean, the first coaching group that I, started in, I think I signed up probably 5 times. And then once the credit card part came up, I was like, nope. But I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I also I've invested in so much with hair and makeup and all this stuff with classes and going to classes and, taking classes online and learning new skills even. But I never had invested in myself, like hiring a coach. And I feel like, there's a lot of coaches right now out there in this world. But even just like podcasts, like the more the merrier, man. If you're like true to what you're saying and you really, really are honest and you're vulnerable with your people and you're teaching them something so valuable that they can take home with them, and really create something out of it, that's a really beautiful thing. So it's actually a great thing that you have all these people to pick from. You know what I mean? So like investing in yourself is daunting when you're like, oh, like that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're spending that money on you, it's going to come back double or tenfold. You know what I mean? So it's like when you are spending 10 grand on your coach for podcasting, I mean, I see it in here. You know what I mean? The setup is great. Like it sounds amazing. If you guys ever are in Utah and want to experience seeing like having this podcast room, Skylar also rents this podcast room out. I'm just saying.
That's right. Come use it.
It's a really cool space. And so like you can just learn by just looking at what he has in here. So it's really important to take that leap of faith and get uncomfortable. Like how uncomfortable was that to like be like 10 grand?
Oh my gosh. It was tough because they use the sales tactics like, well, if you do it now, it's this price, but if you wait till tomorrow, it's another $2,000. So I was like, but I had like a 30-day guarantee. Like I could get it back if it wasn't
right.
What I liked. But yeah, it was scary because at the time it was everything I had. I had that exact amount of money.
Wow.
And I think that was, on purpose.
Right.
But it was scary, but it's like, hey, I'm going all in. This is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And even though like it was stressful, not knowing how I was gonna pay for things,
mm-hmm.
everything still worked out.
It always does.
I've had that multiple times where it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills, but as long as you're taking action and you're doing your best and you're helping people and you're sending out good energy, it always works out.
It does. It really, really does. Especially if you have that like honesty behind it and being yourself and not hiding from who you are. Like, talk about how important it is to get uncomfortable.
Oh, for me, it's the most important thing. And I've been doing it for so long. I kind of get excited when something scares me a little bit. I mean, it's still like, I still get stopped once in a while, like going and talking in front of like a group of people still is like sometimes like, it's still scary and still sometimes it stops me, but it's important because if you aren't stretching, if you're not growing, if you're not doing things that scare you, then you're most likely staying the same.
Right.
But I also don't believe in staying the same. Like you're either growing or you're shrinking.
Right.
Stagnant water starts clean, right? But then it gets filthy. It gets in, it turns into something completely opposite of what it used to be. So it deteriorates.
Yeah.
So it's important to constantly put yourself in a state of discomfort.
Yeah, it
is. So that way you can grow. It's called a comfort zone for a reason. You just have to exit the zone.
Yes. That's really, really good. I mean, I had someone ask me when I first started my coaching group, she was like, how long did it take to really love yourself? And I was like, about 12 years. And that is really daunting, right? But guess what? If I didn't start then, and then I started now, then I still would have 12 years to go. It's different for everybody. One of my family friends, he was on my podcast. He's been sober since for 30 years. He's still working on it. He's like, it's still an everyday battle of like really loving who I am, Brittney, and it's a constant struggle. Even for me, some days I'm like, oh man, but those days are okay. Those days are good to feel it, but you're never going to grow if you don't get uncomfortable. And that's something that I just learned the last 2 years. And I think that's what pushed me even more so to really fully love myself, forgive the past, forgive that younger self of all the things that, I went through. And it's not like they're that terrible, you know what I mean? But the feeling is still the same. You can talk to and interview so many other stories and they might all be different, but you feel the same, And it's like, I feel like when people are scared to get uncomfortable, 5, 10 years, 20 years are going to go by. And I guarantee those people are going to be like, I wish I did something different. I promise you. I promise you that. Like the thing that scares me the most is time. Like I feel like I don't have enough time to like give back as much as I can. That's why I want to make a lot of money. I want to be able to provide for my family a financial freedom and peace, but also create events or things for people to do and give back to charities where I have that money to do that. You know what I mean? I want it to go to a good place. I want it to go to experiences, all these things. So, you know, like people are so scared, like, oh yeah, the money doesn't matter. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
You need money.
You need money. And I used to be like, oh no, I just do it because I love it. And I had to get in that mindset the last couple years. And that was not a 30-day habit of mindset change. That was like still like every single day, like, no, this is important for me to grow. Mm-hmm. Now, other people just want to have money just so they are like rich. You know what I mean? There's a difference. They're like just having that mindset of telling the truth and not telling the truth, getting to where you are telling the truth or not telling the truth. Like, what mask does Brittney have to put on today? If I'm not telling the truth, you're going to forget about that. And then you're going to forget why you're making money. And then you're going to go back into the same place and lose it all. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So for me, like, you have to have those goals of where your money goes to and how much money you want to make. And for me, like, time is just so that's the scariest thing. Like,
yeah, because we only have so much time,
man. And that's, you know, why it's so important to reach out anytime you think about somebody. Just say hi, tell them you love them. You know, I lost my old boss, my second boss I ever had last weekend. And I still can't really believe it because she was just a person that just cared about everybody. You know what I mean? I have amazing memories with her. And, you know, the people that, you know, aren't talking to me right now or think that my podcast is wrong or think that I'm like, you know, raining down hell with whatever I'm doing. That's on them, of course, first and foremost. Because everything I do is coming from love. But what I always try to tell these people is like, even when she was sick, I knew that she had a brain aneurysm. And so she was in a coma. And so some people I reached out to and be like, this is what I'm talking about. You never know. And then she was gone.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? You never know when life is going to take its turn. But you know, I know that God is going to take me or take you when he needs us. And you have to be okay with that too. So it's just so important to take the time that you have and really be grateful. Have a lot of gratitude for that. The time that you get to speak to your people on your podcast is priceless. You get to touch somebody's lives because they're on your podcast. You know what I mean? And you get to experience what you learn through like re-listening or having somebody else listen to it. It's a really beautiful circle of life. And once you tap into that power and love who you are, life is so beautiful. Life becomes an adventure. That's what Jordan Peterson talked about, you know, a couple weeks ago. Like when you're speaking your truth, when you're loving every minute of your life and you have gratitude, you take your life on an adventure. And who doesn't want to be on an adventure? Right?
No one. Everyone wants to. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone wants it like an exciting life.
And you want an adventure on your podcast. Mm-hmm. You want to have people coming in talking about how they make, you know, $10,000 a month. Like, that's badass. That's an adventure. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't want to go on an adventure? And I feel like that's what, you know, you get to pull out of people in business. That's what I get to pull out of people when they don't love themselves. It's like, get to that path to be on an adventure and learn everything you can. Get really uncomfortable. Do scary shit. Are you afraid of bungee jumping? Go do bungee jump. And then when you do it, you'll be like, fuck yeah, I did that. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And what happens to when you do scary stuff, you get more confident and you can do more things. I'm sure starting Utah Hustlers was kind of scary.
Yeah. I didn't know how people were going to respond to it. I was like, man, I know I made this specific. It's Utah. It's 10K a month, but was I supposed to go another level deeper? I still have that fear, but it looks like it's doing pretty good. So
yeah. Yeah. And you have to have that fear that actually keeps you really grounded.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I won't ever bungee jump. I have gone skydiving. I will not bungee jump. I don't like the feeling of like coming back up. You know what I mean? That's what it looks like when you're bungee jumping and then having to go back down. Like this whole
up
thing.
And
like,
down.
oh, hell no. Mm-mm. And plus I always think the rope's going to break, but I guess that's where faith comes in.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe going up and down, I might barf all over the place, and that does not sound fun to me. But skydiving is a trip, man. It is a beautiful thing. So if you want to do something scary, try it. I did it in New Zealand, and I cried the whole way up. And then I felt like I literally was flying like a bird. It was so cool.
Yeah.
So you never know what the outcome is going to be. So do scary shit, get uncomfortable. So the other thing I want to talk about is all this equipment in here. How, now that you have the right equipment, how's it made a difference? Talk about like what equipment that you have that really has made a difference in your podcast.
First off, obviously the microphone, got to have a good mic. So these are Rode pod mics. Highly recommend it. It's a good mic. It's 100, so cool. They're $100 each. My upgrade will be to $400 microphones. So that'll happen down the road because I want to get 4 of them, you know? So, I mean, there's, $1,600 and that's not cheap. Anyway.
Well, I'll buy these ones from you. How about that?
Perfect. Yeah. So I got the Rode pod mics. I've got, newer lights. They're RGB so they can,
Newer's a great brand.
Mm-hmm. So those are my lighting. Lighting's huge for making your, video look good.
Mm-hmm.
Got to make sure you have your lighting right. I have Sony A6100s for my cameras. Those are great cameras because a lot of DSLRs can't record past 30 minutes. These can record basically as long as you want. So you need to get a camera that can do that. So if you're looking at...
That's a good fact. I didn't even think about that.
Make sure it can record long. And I think all newer Sonys can, and some of the older ones, I know the camera I have, it's a few years old.
Right.
But the model before it couldn't go past 30 minutes.
Interesting.
So just make sure it can record long enough because a lot of people don't realize that there's a recording limit on DSLRs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, get a good camera. And then I have the Rodecaster Pro 2.
Yes.
That's my interface that all the audio goes into.
Right.
And I have the A10 Mini Extreme ISO. That's where all the video and the audio goes into.
Mm-hmm.
And then it creates a single file where we have, someone outside monitoring the audio and video.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a file that is, 80, 90% edited. So you can just take that, go add your intro, your outro, do any enhancing you want, and you're good to go. So the setup makes it really easy to podcast, especially if other people are here, because they can leave with pictures. Yeah. They can leave with the 80% edited file.
Right.
So even if you're gonna, a lot of people would spend an hour editing that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just come here, you don't even need to like spend that time. It's worth the money to not have to edit longer. Right.
For sure.
So those are the main pieces of equipment I have that make it sound and look really good.
That's super cool. And last time we talked, you talked about this lighting back here. And I thought that was a really good tip of having a light that actually also reflects from the ceiling and what that does from the look if you're watching a podcast. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different lighting. There's your key light, which lights up the key of the performance. So that's us. We're the key. So it lights us up. And then there is the backlight that disconnects you from the background.
Right.
So that way it doesn't all blend together. And then you have a hair light, which is what you're talking about. So that's literally a light that bounces on your hair. And so that's usually above you. It's usually above you.
Right.
And I got rid of the one I did had because it just wasn't bright enough. And I got these more powerful, like almost $200 lights to put in each corner.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing is the
really
ceiling.
Cool.
They're awesome. Yeah. And they're an extremely good value. So I mean, if anyone wants links to these equipment, they can reach out to me like on Instagram and I'll tell you everything you need to buy.
Well, and also text me everything that you talked about and I can put it in the link.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
But these lights, they now bounce off of the white ceiling because they're a lot brighter, more powerful. Yeah. And then that bounces back onto our hair and kind of gives us a hair light and a backlight in one.
That's kind of cool. And what are these foamy things? Why do you have that?
Yeah, so those absorb the sound, so there's not as much echo in here.
Okay.
There's still a little bit of echo, and I want to get more of them and put them more around the room and maybe even some on the ceiling.
Right.
But it's so there's not echo in the room. Yeah. Like if you go and record your podcast in your living room, it's going to sound different than if you went and recorded it in your closet because there's a lot of clothes in your closet, and those absorb the sound.
Right.
And it just doesn't make it sound so echoey. Echoey sounds
and they kind of
good.
Look cool.
And they look cool. Exactly. That was another reason. That's why they're set up where they are. So it can be in camera.
That's so cool. So. Yeah, I'm obsessed with these lights. I want to get one because those are really, really cool. Because I have, noticed those things with podcasting. So I have a little light that's behind me, but I mean, that girl, she not that bright. You know, she's like, she might go halfway up the wall and you can kind of see it, which is cool. But I'm like, damn, like I need to get like that light. And it's just really interesting. And that's why if you guys are in Utah, please hit up Skylar, record a podcast here with a friend or someone that you want to interview, and or just like interview Skylar on your podcast and just check out his thing. And I love this table. I love that you can put 4 people on here maybe sometime.
Yeah.
I would love, that's something that I've wanted to do, is like have a podcast with multiple people.
I got more microphones.
It's so cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like having all that energy and that interaction and that connection. That's what's so cool about podcasting. To me, like, and I don't know if you've experienced this, the most wonderful thing about podcasting that I have gotten to really feel in my entire body is the connections with people. I have gained more friends, more people I look up to, more social, and soul contracts with people. And it's like I have all these different friends and we reach out to each other sometimes, or I'll check in with these people sometimes and just see how they're doing. The connections are the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's a huge networking tool.
It is.
And like something I was talking to a insurance agent about earlier is he's like, oh, I want to start a podcast. He's like, but I don't know how to make money with it. And I had this idea like right off the bat, and I don't know, inspiration, or I don't know where it came from,
right.
but I was like, what if you interviewed the business owners that you want to handle like their insurance for them, but their whole company? That could be hundreds of employees. So like building a relationship, a deep relationship, takes time. But the coolest thing about a podcast is it shortens that time because you can get in the same room with them. You can have a deep conversation because that's what podcasting is for. So people expect that.
Right.
So you build a relationship really fast. And if they're a business owner and he's selling insurance, he's built that relationship like in 1 hour when it normally would take like 7 hours.
Right.
So if he did that like one a week, he's now making these deep connections with all these different business owners. It's like, hey, you ever need new insurance? Or I'd love an opportunity to like work with you.
Right. Well, and how important are the connections that you make, those relationships? Relationships are everything.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
They are everything. With like everything you want is on the other side of a person. And so the more people you talk to, the more money you're going to make. Think about it.
I love that.
Every little thing you want is on the other side of a person.
Yes.
So.
And I love that, like Ryan Flint talks about that. He is a commercial real estate agent out here. And he's like, like when he speaks, he's like, hey, I have all these business transactions because of the relationships I built. And I was like, dang, like that's so cool. And that's why, like, I know like Daniel, with him getting his real estate license and everything like that, and him becoming a real estate agent, like, he's all about relationships. So I know he's going to be successful. I'm really excited for him to grow. And I think by the time this podcast comes out, or like he should be quitting his job as a firefighter for 21 years to become a real estate agent. And that's because of the relationships he made. But what was the most important relationship he made was with himself. And then those other ones flourished. So, podcasting is really fun. And yeah, I get burnt out on it sometimes, and that's okay. So, my podcast from here on out might not be as consistent. It might not be every week. I'm still going to try to make that happen, because thinking about not having the podcast is really weird because I really enjoy it. But, it's just going to be one of those things because I have to focus on my business right now. And it's really, really important for me to grow that. But at the same time, I still have, this beautiful excitement and energy every time I do film a podcast. It's just a great thing that, I get to have an experience because it does connect me to more people. And I love that.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what time it is, but I always like to try to end these podcasts with like the top 3 or 5 things. So we're going to talk about podcasting. What are the top 3 to 5 things that people need to start a podcast? Now, I know we talked about that a little bit, but I want you to talk about the things, that you have to have, but also the things that you have to how do you mentally prepare to really step in? podcast?
Yeah. So I think number one, you got to be disciplined. There's going to be, if your audience thinks they're getting an episode every week, you got to give them that episode every week, because you're building trust, building
you,
a
Skylar,
brand.
for telling me that.
Well, it also
It's
depends.
true, though.
It also
It's
depends
true.
on what you want out of the podcast.
Right.
You got to set those goals for you and your
Yeah.
listeners. And because if the whole point is to network,
Yep.
then it doesn't really matter if you're, how often you release. You could do
Right.
5 in a week. You could do 1 in a month. If that's the goal of it is for you to network with other people you want to work with, then that's the goal of it.
Yeah.
So the answer to every question is it depends, right? But yeah, so be consistent, build that consistency and that discipline. It's like, even though like it's tough getting a guest for this week or I don't want to edit it or whatever, it's like, you just got to do it. That's another thing, is it's something you have to do every single week. For most people, do a weekly one. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So discipline. Equipment. We are talking about equipment. Get a good microphone, get a good camera if you can.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are very specific on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
If it feels like you're too specific, you're right on the money. If it feels like you don't have a big audience, you're right on the money, because our brains can't even comprehend what 100,000 people look like.
Right.
I'm at, like, there's 30 million people in the United States. Like, our brains cannot comprehend how big that is. And you only need like 1% of those people to actually listen to have a wildly successful podcast.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to get too specific, because you could talk about time management. But if you talk about time management for sales professionals, that's even more specific.
Yeah.
Time management for sales professionals that sell solar.
Yeah.
That's even more specific.
Right.
So you can always go like a level deeper and just
Right.
try to go as deep as you can. I think there's a point where you can get too specific, but it's hard to do. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yeah. That's just like me trying to explain how color happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like showing colors and people are like, what is that? Well, how's that going to work out?
Yeah.
That's getting too deep, and I do that all the time because I can't help explaining.
Yeah. Right.
But sometimes I can confuse my clients that way if I'm explaining like way too much. You know what I'm saying? So that is actually a really, really great tip. If you're confusing yourself, then you're probably confusing the audience.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
agree.
So those are great tips. And, just like, health is wealth, going back to that, setting your mind, your body up for success so you have a purpose. And once you have a purpose, you have an audience. You might not hear back from the audience as much, but, it's like the event that I went to in September, I had people come up like to me and say like, oh my gosh, Brittney, I love your podcast. I listened to it. Thank you. And you're like, God, thank you. You know what I mean? So I'm very grateful for the audience that I have. And I'm very grateful that you have come and shared your knowledge about podcasting with me and the audience today. I've learned a lot. I hope you guys have too. And look out for Utah Hustlers, you guys. You can find that on any platform.
Yep.
And it's just super exciting that we get to learn from you and learn how to make $10,000 a month. So I better get my ass listening to these episodes as soon as possible. So if you guys have any questions for Skylar, please reach out to him. I will have all this information in the Dropbox below, including his Instagram handle and everything like that. Don't be afraid. We're here for you.
Yeah.
So thank you, Skylar.
Perfect. Thanks, Brittney, for having me on.
Have an
Appreciate it.
amazing week. And that's it. That's a wrap.
Sweet. Okay, right on.
Yay. We did it.
We did.
We did
This
it.
one worked. I know it did.
Thank you.